In the very beginning, in terms of institutional care, poor people who ended up with mental health issues, and that's a huge, broad term because nobody really defined what mental health issues were back then. If you didn't have any money, then you ended up usually in a county poorhouse. If they thought you were curable, you might be transferred to the state asylum in Utica. And you could stay there for a maximum of 2 years, and if they decided you were not curable, or what they would call chronically insane, then you'd end up back in the poorhouse. And so there really wasn't a whole lot of treatment. Sometimes people were committed by family members because of their behavior, if their behavior was thought to be eccentric or unusual, and that could be something as simple as simply not doing what was conventionally acceptable. It could be, being argumentative. It could be acting violently. Postpartum depression was another thing that often landed women in institutions. There were arguments about whether mental illness or insanity, and really was the term that was used, was an ailment the way cholera or tuberculosis was, whether it was a disease of the brain that could be cured or a disease of the mind that required a different kind of treatment. And there was a lot of discussion within the medical literature about how to define what it was. And they measured every part of the human body you could: your eyelids, your skin tone, your pulse, your stool, how well you slept, trying to decide how you could identify the onset of an episode. And it was thought if you could identify how they began, you might be able to prevent them. There was even some lip service given to the idea that life was hard, and that just the pursuit of getting by in life could contribute to mental illness. You can't judge the treatment or the understanding of mental illness in the 19th century from where we sit today. You just can't. They were really trying to figure it out. As I said, it's really easy to buy into the urban legend, the sort of creepy asylum where scary things happened in the basement. And that's, for the most part, wasn't true. I mean, there was restraint. There was a lot more restraint of mental health patients in the poorhouse than there probably was here. The records certainly indicate that restraint was not used as much here as it was in the poorhouse. So there were, it was not pleasant, certainly, but they were trying to understand something that didn't bleed and didn't vomit, and there weren't the physical symptoms the way there are in physical illness. So when you read the medical literature, I think that's where you really get an understanding of just how much people, especially healthcare practitioners, took it seriously. KIRKBRIDE was from an asylum in Pennsylvania, and he really wanted to change how the institution contributed to the treatment of patients. The whole moral management idea was that you would take the chaos out of the patient's life and put them into a situation that was ordered and predictable. And you did that with an institution that was designed to run in a specific way, and grounds that were designed to enhance mental well-being. The idea was to encourage, patients to stroll the grounds, and exercise and fresh air were a big part of the treatment in moral management, as was work. So there were jobs for men included working in the farms and taking care of the buildings and maintenance and repair. For women, it was more the domestic sorts of things, working in the kitchens and knitting and sewing and those sorts of things. And so patients weren't compelled to work, but they were encouraged to work as part of that organized structure of their day. And so the Richardson complex, the Buffalo State Asylum, was really, one of the perfect examples of that, with very few exceptions. What always really resonated with me, especially when I started to look at some of the records, is that the people who were in these institutions were the regular, everyday people who built the city. They were the carpenters and the bricklayers and the stonemasons and the saloon owners. We hear in Buffalo about the sort of the Gilded Age and the age of the Pan Am and Millionaires Row and all those things that made Buffalo one of the most important cities in the world in the 19th century. But the people who got us there were the people sometimes who ended up in these institutions, and I think that their story needs to be told as well.